Hello, it's Sociology 20, and today we're going to be looking at our third lesson, Social Science Skills and Methods. So we'll see a lot of these are very much coincidental with other scientific skills and methods that you might have looked at elsewhere. So scientific research, it should be reliable. If you are doing a study, you don't want to twist it to meet your purposes. It should be repeatable in different settings at different times. So for example, when I ask about your favorite dessert, and if I only survey two people, I might say, hey, look at that. They both like chocolate cupcakes. But if I repeat that, it's not necessarily reliable. Two other people might pick something totally different. Having a large size sample is one way that you could get a more reliable kind of result. Informants, those are the people who give you research when it comes to sociology, whether it's a simple question like that or whether it's something much more in depth, like perhaps a long term or longitudinal study. Now, in anthropology, there are some specific skills and methods that really apply to them, the culture of studies, as we will either have or will look at in the Doing Anthropology computer game, where you get a chance to do some field studies. So, vague notes, maybe you're in a hurry, maybe you're rushing down a canoe and you see something that's worth observing, you want to take it down, you might not have time to get all the details. This is kind of why, when there are car accidents or other crimes, eyewitness testimony can be so unreliable, right? If you see someone getting assaulted, one eyewitness might say, "Oh, I'm pretty sure they were 5'3." Another might say, "I'm sure they were 6'3." Might depend on your perspective. Maybe you're shorter than that, and everyone looks taller than you. Concrete notes are much more detailed and have full description. So in the particular simulation that we did, the character that you play, he or she has some time to go into their hut and write down more of the details, as much as they can recall, that can actually be used to draw upon later as firsthand information. We're flying through this. So reflexivity. So now this is a tricky one, because when we're studying different cultures, well, we're coming in from our own culture, our own biases of what we consider to be acceptable and normal. So as it says on that slide there, if you're studying a society that has polygyny, where you are marrying multiple wives, you might be shocked at that. You might be offended, maybe on religious reasons. You think, hey, no, that's a sin. But that perhaps might cloud your judgment of being able to actually observe what this culture is really like. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree or change your culture, but being aware of what biases are you bringing in. I know when I was studying cultural anthropology in university, my first year, I was a little bit shocked at some of the practices, particularly in India, of burning widows after the husband had died on the funeral pyre. Now, this is illegal in India now. It's rarely done, more in like remote rural areas. But yeah, for me, it was shocked. I was shocked by it. And I thought, wow, if I were to study this culture more in depth, would that perhaps affect how I view other parts of the culture? I don't want to compromise myself as a researcher. Informed consent. Now, it's great to stalk people and get their information, but in psychology, sociology, anthropology, the social sciences, we need to make sure that we are following ethical guidelines. So if you're collecting information from people, such as in the simulation, you went to these different villages, it's your job, part of your responsibility, to let them know that here's what the information is being used for. In psychology in university, I had the opportunity to take part in several experiments. So they told me what the information would be used for. One of the frustrating things, though, as a participant in the survey or the experiment, was that I didn't actually get to find out the results of their experiments that they had done. Were other people just as bizarre as me, for example? So informed consent is really important. Otherwise, your entire study could be thrown out in the trash. Okay, so psychology, what kind of approaches and methods does psychology have? Well, one of the instruments that they use, in some cases, particularly if we look at the area of learning and cognition, which is just a really fancy word for thinking, is intelligent quotient. So we have different areas where we may be stronger or weaker. You might think of yourself as better with language or better with math. But the IQ looks at a general assessment of this. Some of you have mentioned that you have done an IQ test before. You probably have at some point, maybe without even realizing it. I know when I was in school, we just got these little fun things to fill out, and then suddenly a bunch of us got taken out of a room and being told, hey, got some bad news for you. You can see an example of a very common type of question in an IQ test in the top right. And again, cultural sensitivity plays a really big role here. A good IQ test should not be biased culturally. So, for example, there are concerns that some of the tests that are given out, not necessarily IQ tests, but standardized tests, like in Alberta, our curriculum is also used in the Northwest Territories. Well, in the Northwest Territories, they might have vehicles that are not used so much in Alberta or vice versa. And so if a word problem is referring to, I don't know, a sea-doo or a bus, and they don't have buses driving in the frozen wastes of the north, then that could disadvantage those students. And perhaps the IQ test could be used to draw an unfavorable and unfair conclusion. The regression to the mean. So this is this idea that with the IQ test, that from generation to generation, from population to population, the IQ should be consistent. And so the average IQ score is supposed to be 100. I've written some different IQ tests, some of them online. Some of them are very flattering. Some of them are about like 15 points more for me than I've seen on like actual IQ tests that I've taken. And I think, yeah, let's go with the higher number. That's got to be the right one. But across a population, you really need to test out that IQ test with several different people to see if it is valid. One of the things that sometimes they do with IQ tests is if you're older, your score will be judged a little bit more softly because they are tending usually to be focused on like young adults and teenagers are at the most advantage, right? Your brain is at the peak of its development, hasn't started to decline yet. So we shouldn't be seeing that one generation is suddenly 20 points lower or 20 points higher on the IQ scale. We'll look at this, well, perhaps more if you're taking psychology. IQ is basically your cognitive age divided by your mental age. So if you are at the cognitive age of a 6-year-old, but you are 5 years old, you will have an IQ of 120 because yeah, that number is then multiplied by 100. Yes. Okay. The double blind principle is this idea that, again, we want to avoid bias. And so when we're performing an experiment, you don't necessarily know to what group your subject belongs. And so, for example, if you are administering an IQ test, some of them are not just written on paper, you will be asked oral questions as well, particularly for young children who can't read yet. They will usually have someone there with them doing that. Maybe they're playing with blocks or putting a puzzle together. The test can look very, very different, but if the experimenter is perhaps wanting to come to a certain conclusion, then a double-blind test can help with that. Now, this was a big concern that racists were wanting to use IQ tests to pretty much disprove or prove that one ethnic group was superior to another. IQ tests that have been fair show that this is not the case. There is no advantage that one race has intellectually over another. So very, very careful. We can learn things. We can help people with this research. But if it's being drawn to an unfair conclusion and not being applied with proper scientific rigor, then it can be used for great harm. And lastly, heritable traits are acquired through genes. And so it looks like my little video of myself is covering up that bottom. That's very unfortunate, but we have a lot of traits, a lot of physical traits are heritable. There's been some research into DNA and how DNA can be affected through, let me just go back here. I can't go back, it's impossible. About how DNA has been affected through trauma. Yeah, I'm learning new things, right? So I guess if designing the PowerPoint, making a video of it was part of an IQ test, my score has just plummeted. So on the topic of unethical experiments, there have been some doozies of unethical experiments. And I mentioned to you earlier about the little Albert experiment, where you see the picture there, where he was playing with a fuzzy little bunny, and John Watson came up behind him. This is the 1920s, and he crashed and made a loud noise, crashed and banged. I guess it was the jazz age. But it scared little Albert, and he did this enough until he feared all soft, fluffy creatures. So today, very unethical to traumatize a child like that. There are plenty of other unethical experiments that I would like you to unearth. Unearth one of them and look at, okay, what was it trying to find out? What were the variables? And what conclusions did it reach? What was actually unethical about the experiment? We'll be sharing these as a class later. But in the meantime, we're going to look at some sociological skills and methods, because that's what we're here for, right? The sociology. So causal theories, this is a theory that one variable is the cause of another. So let's take a look at the caption there, looking at child abuse, and that some people have this illusion of, or image in their head perhaps, of a broken home, an impoverished home, there's abuse going on. And now, yeah, having money is very helpful. It can help you get an education, can help you to get a good career if your family is in a good place. But the money and the socioeconomic status of your family is not actually linked to the odds in which you will face any kind of abuse. That abuse happens at consistent rates throughout poorer communities and wealthier communities. So if your theory is that having not much money will lead to more abuse, that theory would actually be incorrect. But if your theory is that having more money will perhaps lead to better educational opportunities, then yeah, the evidence would play out that that theory is correct. And again, it's why we call them theories, not necessarily laws, because yeah, we want to have evidence to support those theories, but they could be disproven in the event that the evidence points elsewhere. A consequential theory, you're trying to predict what will happen to the second variable if a first variable is changed. So what will graduation rates be like if we introduce a breakfast program in school? Maybe these kids are failing their exams because they didn't have a good breakfast. So let's find out. A hypothesis, that could be. Maybe the hypothesis is give the kids breakfast, their graduation rates should improve. They should improve. Sorry, I was just saying because I was thinking about breakfast. That's what we're trying to prove. The independent variable, this is something you can control, has an effect on the second factor. Now, hopefully not too much of a news flash for you from having taken science class. In this case, the independent variable is the cereal. Wow, we've got a delicious bowl of crunchy cereal. Mm. Mm. Excuse me. That's delicious. That's an independent variable and a delicious variable. Okay. Dependent variable is affected by what happened from that first variable. It should react. If they are connected, it should react to that change. But it gets tricky. What if you have intervening variables? And whereas in a science lab, you might be able to completely control the environment. In the setting such as a school, there will be other human factors going on. Now, you might have other things going on in the school, like an after-school reading program that is also trying to meet the same goal. So it can be then very hard to ascertain what is helping the graduation rates. Is it the cereal? Is it the reading program? Maybe the graduation rates still go down. Maybe neither one helped. Maybe it's a series of coincidences because maybe the kids were eating breakfast, but a whole bunch of them also had parents who found jobs and now they're living a more affluent lifestyle, right? It's very tricky, those intervening variables. So it's really why you need to have a reliable test that can be repeated over and over so that you can actually draw those kinds of conclusions. It's pretty exciting stuff, isn't it? So now this takes us to your opportunity to indulge your devious side. You're going to design your own unethical experiment to try to find out something about human behavior. It can be one of those behaviors you examined in your first activity about sociological viewpoints, where you looked at the structural functionist, conflict, and symbolic interaction as schools. It can be something entirely different. It doesn't have to be something bad. It could be about how often do people go to the bathroom, for example. So if that's what you want to find out about, Then look at what kind of variables will affect how often they go to the bathroom. Is the teacher letting them drink a lot of water in class? Are the students just happening to bring it? What is your hypothesis? What are the ways you would study this? Perhaps you would follow them into the bathroom and see, are they really actually going to the bathroom? Now, this is the important thing before you flag this, is that you are not going to execute this experiment. You are not stalking people. You are not performing an unethical experiment. You are examining where is the line where ethics are breached in a study. You later on will be designing your own study, which needs to get ethics approval from me before you do it. But you're going to share these unethical experiments with each other. Perhaps something that another group finds unethical, you don't find problematic at all. So we will discuss, are these really unethical experiments? Do they cross the line, and why? Where is our line as a class? So very important. If you want to make it in the field of sociology, you have to make sure you don't get expelled. So enjoy making a devious, unethical experiment. Hopefully that would shed light on something you are interested about with human behavior. Enjoy your class. Bye-bye.